Hello and welcome. Really appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon or morning, depending upon where you are, potentially even evening if you're somewhere overseas. Really appreciate everyone joining us. And as people start to shuffle in, I'm going to do a quick opening and then move us along. So, as a very brief intro, my name is Scott, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Fohr. And before I get into some of this stuff, I do want to take a minute to congratulate our founder and CEO, James Nord, and his wife, Kristen, on the birth of their first child late last week, Rivington Nord. We're so happy for his family and for our family to add a little Nord into the group. Secondly, just so everyone knows, we are actively growing our business at Fohr in both sales and client services. So if you like what you hear today and you know anyone who would like to join us, uh, preparing to blast off influencer marketing company in New York City, please reach out and let us know. We're going to get to this soon. What I'd like to share really quickly is I joined Fohr in late August of 2025. And the thing that got me most excited outside of the great people that work here is Predictive. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. As James and I spoke throughout the summer about what was really missing in influencer marketing, it was data, accountability, and more certainty around results. So I'm truly thrilled to be sharing details around Predictive with you today. And Grace, if you hop back to one slide really quick, if you will indulge me for a few minutes, I have a handful of slides I'll walk you through, and then I'll shift to the main event and turn it over to Grace. As you can see, Grace is our EVP of strategy here at Fohr, and also to Caroline, who we're thrilled to be here with us, who is the global head of brand and marketing at the RealReal. So again, if you will indulge, you got a quick preview of this slide. We always like to show people that A, we've been around for a long time. We're now going into our 13th year in influencer marketing. And as you can see here, we've gotten quite a few awards that we're proud of. You can also see a quick glance on this next slide of a lot of the customers that we work with currently. You'll see again the main event customer on here in line 2 at the bottom there. Oh, wait, it changed. Sorry. It was like that. In any case, this is a nice display of our customers that we've worked with in the past that we're happy to share. And this is really the crux of what we'll be talking about to you today, where we've recognized there's a problem in creator marketing. And in most cases, what we've seen historically is that most brands are really guessing and wasting tons of money doing it. Now, we at Fohr, we don't guess. And I'll tell you how and why we don't guess, and then we'll get to this. Because the how is really where we go in and we forecast. So we know what the campaign performance should be, should look like before you spend a dollar. We work through our predictive technology to understand the creators that are best fit for you and your brand. And if by small chance we get that wrong, we actually ensure these predictions. So we guarantee the results from the creators that they're delivering to what we talk about in these campaigns. So I wanted to just boil this down in its simplest of form. This is definitely not a sales presentation. So if we move forward, that's going to be all for me from a while. I'm going to turn it over to Grace and to Caroline and let you guys enjoy the show.
Amazing. Thank you, Scott. And hi, everyone. Looks like we've got a lot of people here today. Feel free to drop into the chat where you're dialing in from, location, brand, and thank you again for joining us. So I'm super excited to be presenting this today with a dream client of mine, the RealReal. And we're thrilled to have Caroline with us here today as well to answer some questions and have a bit of a chat about this. But first, I'm going to explain the work that we have been doing together and why it matters. So the RealReal have been a client of ours since last year, and this predictive technology and approach is still very new for us. So the RealReal came to mind for us as the perfect brand to be testing this technology with, this new approach with. We've had the gift of working with Carolyn's team and know that they're super focused on innovation. They're very willing and open to testing new things if there's a confidence that it is going to drive results. So they were the first brand that we brought on to be able to test this out. So the primary goal for us was to be able to put something into market as an A/B test to be able to say, okay, we've done things the traditional way. We've been running programming that is already exceeding industry benchmarks. But what if we launch this predictive technology, a new approach? How is it going to stack up? Let's test it out. So that was our primary goal in approaching the RealReal with this test. But ultimately, we still needed to make sure it was going to be delivering for the RealReal's goals. So they're super focused right now on driving consignment. As you know, a very big RealReal shopper myself, a lot of us are shopping a lot, not as many of us are selling a lot. So our programming has been built around driving more of that sell through for the RealReal. So predictive technology, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this in our emails and on social and wondering a little bit of what it is. So Scott briefly touched on the forecasting element. And right now, what we have on the slide is a look at the results from our predictive simulation. So I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the simulation itself, but it's a probability-based technology and method, not about averages. We're looking at probability so we can forecast out more accurate results. So from that simulation, we're looking at a group of talent here, all macro talent, who we were looking at for the RealReal and who were forecasted to drive a very similar amount of views. But if we look at their followings, they're incredibly different. So we've got a big range here from 784,000 on the left, right up to 53 million. And again, based on this simulation, based on this methodology, all of those individuals were predicted to get a similar amount of views. So if we consider how big of a factor following is in terms of determining price and how much budget there is therefore to be misspent or wasted, it's an incredibly massive delta between that lowest following and the highest. So predictive in action, this is an example of our core partners. So again, running this talent through this simulation and system. We have Gwyneth Paltrow icon, well, two icons on the screen, but we have Gwyneth Paltrow on the left, and running her channel through this predictive simulation. It read as a 90% confidence that she would get at least 687,000 views. Whereas on the right, Miranda Kerr, who has a much more substantial following at 14.3 million followers, the 90% confidence from the simulation said we'd only get 377,000 views. So ultimately, from a mixture of the simulation and our team's cultural intelligence and knowing that Marty Supreme was coming out and how great this of a moment this would be for the RealReal, we locked in Gwyneth and ultimately were able to deliver 3 million organic views and over 44,000 engagements. So pretty insane performance and is a testament to what's possible here. Same kind of view here, but different talent. So on the left, we have Becca Bloom, who has 2.9 million followers. And on the right, we have Jesse James, who has 4.3 million followers. And the simulation, again, giving us a kind of snapshot look at what we could expect at a 90% confidence level. we ultimately engaged Becca. Her results were insane. And this is a mixture of her posting on her core channel that we contracted her for and syndicated, but it's all organic performance. So 10.4 million organic views and nearly 500,000 organic engagements, which is just absolutely insane. And so if we look back at some of these results of, again, comparing the more standard, typical workflow in creator marketing to this predictive test with the RealReal, we saw over 500% more views campaign over campaign, which was staggering. Part of this campaign was also, we have the hero talent, which we just saw, but part of it was also putting a bulletin up on our Fohr technology and asking for hand raisers to say who would like to be a part of this campaign and selecting from there. We had over 700 people raise their hand in a 24-hour period. And often I think brands hear hand raiser campaigns and they think that there might not be a particularly high quality of people who are saying, yep, I want to be involved versus approaching. But the total cross-platform audience of those 700 people was 73.2 million, which again is pretty staggering. The comment sentiment out of this campaign was 100% positive or neutral, neutral just being irrelevant to the products, but ultimately still positive. So an enormous volume of engagements and 14 times more efficient spend campaign over campaign. So if we looked at the dollars deployed and we looked at the results, 14 times more efficient, which again is super, super exciting about the potential of what's to come with this new modeling. Okay, and so with that, I'm so excited to welcome Caroline. And Caroline, I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment, but do just want to say, again, thank you so much for being game to jump onto this test with us. You have been such a wonderful partner in this process and have been so focused on innovation and testing. So I'd love to just kick us off if you could give a little bit of background on yourself, your role, and what you're excited about right now at the RealReal.
Yeah, of course, Grace. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for bringing us this opportunity. As you mentioned, I love to test things, so it was an exciting opportunity. But I lead our brand and marketing for experience for the RealReal. So my remit really sits at the intersection of how does the brand show up in culture, and how are we driving campaigns to engage our customers, and then how do they actually experience us as a brand. So for us, I would say influencer and creator marketing. It plays a really important role in our broader ecosystem because we have a lot of data and we have a lot of expertise around authentication and pricing. And we can tell you all the time, like our favorite ways to shop the RealReal. We swap with each other, our favorite tips and tricks all the time. And even the things we're shopping for. But honestly, like that's best expressed through people, right? Like it's a human connection. And so creators are sort of a powerful way for us to authentically engage in those topics because the brand is then traveling through a trusted voice who is talking about their experience or how we made them smarter in managing their closet. And it actually occurs to me that I may have misstepped and not actually shared what the RealReal is. We are the largest authenticated luxury resale platform in the United States. We have over 42 million members who are engaging with our platform every day to buy and sell their luxury goods. So all of that is existing within that context, I should say.
Amazing. Beautiful. And fun fact, actually, on Scott's first day, I went to explain what the RealReal was, and he was like, you don't think I know what the RealReal is? Hello, come on. Okay, awesome. That's amazing. And so I couldn't agree more about, having the more human messaging deliver the benefits of the real. Like, I think I've always been a huge shopper myself. I have shared with you before that I literally bought my wedding dress on the RealReal, but
Love
in
it.
the work that we've done together, it ultimately convinced me to start consigning as well. So it's like, it's so fascinating when you see the kind of benefits be expressed in such a human and compelling way from creators that it really can expedite you to action. Since we started working together, you have always been really clear and focused in your audience strategy and your how you think about influencers and where you think you have such a talented in-house team. You all are doing so many impressive, amazing things, and you have such a wonderful culture of collaboration and curiosity and again testing. But you've always explained it as core, crew, crowd, which has been really clear and helpful for us in understanding our role. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about what that means for the RealReal and how you've thought about what your team owns versus where and how you seek external support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give full credit to Nike because Nike actually built the core crew crowd model. So I should openly say that it is their model that I just appreciated and brought into my world. But when we think about core crew crowd for the RealReal, we're really talking about a customer and their adjacency to the fashion world. So if you think about our core, it's a really deeply fashion literate customer, right? Collectors, insiders, people who already understand the value, the provenance of like why the RealReal exists. And we're very grateful to have a strong team in-house that knows how to engage that audience with credibility and with nuance. And we have a very sort of loving relationship with that audience. But as we expand and as we grow as a business, we are really looking at people who are less close to the fashion world, right? Customers who are adjacent to fashion or newly curious about luxury resale. And they just may not yet be fluent in how to optimize their closet and how to constantly rotate it. So reaching them requires some different entry points, some different voices, a lot more scale. And the challenge with doing that is expanding without losing the efficiency or the brand's integrity. Because I think that's, as my heart has started in brand and I moved more into the performance space. So I think, for me, brand integrity is really just so core. And how do you do both is critical. So when you all approached us about this test, I think what really excited me was this idea that we could expand deliberately, thoughtfully, intentionally through the right creators and communities, but also be measuring that incremental impact and how well we'd be able to move the needle, not just move perception or, sort of have like more volume of conversation.
Awesome. Absolutely. And you just touched on this, that kind of your experience in both brand and performance spaces. And I think one of the many challenges in creator marketing is that it sits in this kind of nebulous space between the two, or depending on the brand that you're working with, it's organized and thought of in completely different ways. Some brands think of it as purely brand, some think of it as purely performance, some think of it as somewhere in the middle. All of the teams are organized in different ways, all of the outputs look different. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that kind of tension and how that has showed up for your team. And yeah, just a little bit about like the kind of challenges of creator marketing without a predictive model.
Yeah, and I think, if you sort of think about how to sort of really start like think about the planning versus hoping, right? So for me, so I think in brand, it's hard to think about the upper funnel metrics versus the lower funnel metrics. But what I liked about this was that we could have these clear expectations going in. We could give creators the transparency and allow them to create engaging content for their audience, right? So we could say, hey, here's what we need to talk about, but creators do great work, right? They want to create engaging content for their audiences, and they realistically know how to do that better than most of the prescriptive briefs that I think often brands who want to retain their integrity are sort of inclined to give. And I think that often the sort of fear that follows is it doesn't allow for the accountability against either that brand's integrity or hitting a target number or how you need to hit view rates, right? But a lot of times, creators are hesitant to partner with brands because they get this really tight, narrow brief that they're like, that's not going to work for my audience. Like, that's just not going to work. And so this helped us find the balance of that, right? Like, I think we could have a clear brief. And also we could have this clear expectation and forecast and build into our own plan. So it allowed for a better dialogue, I think, between us and the creator marketing world in terms of what was going to work for both of us.
Absolutely. I've joked before that, so I've now been in this space for 12 years and up for that whole time. And the word influencer wasn't even a word then. We were talking about fashion bloggers. So it was a very different time.
Yeah.
And despite the industry having grown and changed and evolved so much every year, every day, it feels like something that hasn't had a huge amount of evolution is this debate between who gets more control, the brand or the creator. And I've often felt a little bit like industry therapist where I speak to the brand and I'm like, well, you really have to understand, like, as you just said, the creator is hooking and holding their audience attention in a way that brands are struggling to. And
Yeah.
then on the creator side, I'm having the conversations where it's like, I know you want complete creative control, but also the brand has a remit. They have messages they need to hit. They have this, they have that. And that conversation, just if you go to any panel with a creator and a brand, it's like it's the same kind of conversation that's been happening on loop for a decade or more.
In fairness, it's probably not unlike the brand versus performance, right?
Totally,
Like the
exactly.
same loop. But I do, I think that with a brand and a creator, there is that fit lock. Like you have to sort of think about what is the kind of content that works well for your brand and make sure that you're thinking about working with creators that have that fit lock.
Mhm.
So you do have that as sort of the baseline and that I think is confidence inducing and just the same way that like in the brand and performance world there's a confidence gap between brand spend and performance spend. And so I think you can believe in something instinctively, right?
Mhm.
But belief alone is not enough when you're making a meaningful investment decision, right? And so it's hard to take a creator I think sometimes it's hard to take a creator conversation and fit it into the traditional performance frameworks. And so, how do you really forecast that and justify scaled spend without that? And so, I think that the sort of predictive performance approach really did help us put a better round of numbers against that confidence gap.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think too that, and hope is not a strategy. As you said, like the planning or hoping. And I think the entire industry conversation has been about performance volatility and things being so up and down, and you never know with the algorithm, and it's this and it's that. And those are the things that, we've been saying for a long time as well. But with this new model, it's so exciting to be able to be leveling up out of that. And to just actually quickly double click into something you just said and to go back to the initial framing of predictive, something I want to be clear on for everyone who's joining today is that part of the simulations that you just saw, where at a per creator level, we can forecast out 90% confidence level of like, you're going to hit this number. We are contracting our creators with those views benchmarks in mind to say, this is the expectation in the upfront. Here's what we need you to hit. It's not a number that's plucked out of thin air. It is based on your historical performance and our probability modeling. And we are super confident that you can get there for all of this rationale. And we want to be really, really clear upfront that that's the expectation and is in your contract. And also, here's what we need your audience to understand. It's not just a laundry list of brand key messages. We need your audience to take this thing away. And now you have the clarity of what success looks like, and you have the space and freedom to kind of operate within those bounds instead of what you just hit on before, Caroline, of like brands often accidentally getting in the way through coming to a creator and giving a brief that's just too loaded up with key messages, and the creator thinks success looks like me saying all of this, regardless of the result. That's what the brand wants. And so I think this does change the dialogue into something that is a mutual accountability of the brand giving a brief that's workable and the creator understanding that a great job looks like great performance.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you hit a little bit there, Caroline, as well on I guess being like a passionate brand marketer and thinking about brand DNA, and as you scale, making sure that you're really protecting that. And I've always been quite pedantic and particular myself with looking at brand alignment and brand fit.
Knew I liked you.
Um, but this, again, because of this model kind of bubbling up people to the top, it does also force new vetting processes and behaviors and kind of get us to expand our aperture a little bit on who potential audiences are and what the creators could be who are reaching them. So I'd love to just hear a little bit about your experience in reviewing talent, vetting talent, and then seeing the performance on this type of campaign.
Yeah, and I think that that continues to evolve for us, in working through this. I think there are definitely some names that you all surfaced in the course of the campaigns we've worked together on where we're like, oh, really? And like, are you sure? And to be honest, they performed really well. And so I do think there's a difference between that and brand fit, right? Like there's I would say very few people that were surfaced that were not brand fit suggestions, and we can review them for that. But I do think you end up with some insights that you didn't know previously too, right? Because I love to test things. Grace, you've said that I'm sort of willing to play in small ways so that you learn, because I think that's really honestly the only way to survive the constant evolution of modern marketing. But I do think that you end up learning things that you sort of didn't expect this particular person in this adjacent space to be what would make sense to move a needle, but actually they unlocked an audience that didn't previously exist. And I think this sort of allows you to do that because you're holding them accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like before, it's a little bit harder or riskier to do that.
Totally. I think too that, the first question I've gotten about the accountability piece from so many people is like, wait, and creators are agreeing to that? Like that doesn't why are they agreeing to it?
Help
And
them. I mean,
yeah, it helps them ultimately. Like I think as long as I've always compared a little bit to leadership in the sense that there's a difference between like just telling someone how to do something and trying to control the how versus what success looks like and why, and giving them that context and then giving them the room to get there. And, predictable is the word of the day. Like I think creators want predictable revenue too. They want to know that what the expectation was, did they hit it, and can they expect to potentially be re-engaged? So I think that, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It lives on that spectrum of like the accountability to empowerment, right? Like you want to empower them and help them know what you're looking for and what to create, but then you're also giving them some amount of accountability to you and what you need to land in your goals.
Awesome. One quick tip on the vetting piece or expanding into creators that you might not have picked up on or had a team member spot or whatever it might be. A great example that I love from our recent campaign together with that in mind is thinking about like one of our top performers was a Spanish speaking creator from Miami, and just based on whoever's vetting on anyone's team, that might not have been someone who bubbled up to the top. And then that could have been a creator who was entirely overlooked. But to get that insane performance, and again, there was that brand fit and alignment, it just might not have been in our direct circle of influence, so to speak, or our algorithm. So I think that's what's really exciting here too. And on that front, you had shared an example with me of like I guess that circle of influences idea, or how your own realm of algorithm and who is relevant or all of those things kind of come into play in thinking about your experience of working with Gwyneth and Becca, both of whom were incredibly high performing. But would love to there was some text that you got for one and not the other. I'd love to just have you share a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people saw this over the holiday. We did partner with Becca and with Gwyneth, and it's funny, we saw a lot of outreach. I think I got like 20 different text messages about Gwyneth posting. And but then there was a ton of engagement with Becca. And so it's interesting to see like you know what your cohort and your community are particularly connected to. And I think that can sometimes make you myopic, where like Becca outperformed Gwyneth, actually. I just heard about Gwyneth more. And so sometimes it can be misleading when you live in your cohort. And so if you're looking at data the data and the numbers tell a very different story. And so you may have been a little bit fearful to step into a different space as a brand, and taking it completely away from the Becca and the Gwyneth of it all. Like we felt very confident in both, but we were surprised to see Becca's perform so strongly. And I think there's also a role where they perform in different ways that we've absolutely recognized and see. And like we loved both posts. We thought both of them were really great.
Amazing.
And
Yeah.
so like no complaints in either way. The team, both teams are amazing and both posts are amazing. It was interesting to see the level of viewer rates on both though.
Awesome. Another thing that I think has been really fun about the testing that we've done together is that we have activated with quite a high volume of people, but in really tight cadence windows. And even again, being a real shopper myself, like I often will see a piece of content and then, or get an idea for something I want to search, and I won't click through. I'll bounce out and jump into an app. And, customers are always shopping in really non-linear ways, and attribution can then be a bit of a nightmare for marketers. And a lot of us have that direct experience of like, well, as an audience member, I know this is even more powerful than the numbers are indicating. But I'd love to just chat a little bit about those kind of tight testing windows and what that unearthed or for you.
Yeah, well, I think it does help because if it's in a tight window, you can sort of look at media spend over me, like you can sort of isolate the impact. And so, for example, if you think about the way we all behave, it is very routine that I see someone's story or I, post or whatever, and then I don't think to go look at that brand until 3 hours later and it becomes direct traffic. So you can't actually attribute it to that particular creator's moment. And so I think that the sort of the UTMs of it all, I think, get a little bit muddy in tracking impact. And so if you put it into a tight window, you're able to see like, oh, that's really interesting when we had this sort of surround sound effect going on, right? So where you have like a bunch of people in this tight window talking about the brand. You're like, that's really interesting when we have this moment of being on, this is what it looks like for a lift in overall traffic, right? Or something. You can sort of decide what makes sense for your brand in terms of metrics, but I do think that the tight window allows you to assess impact a little bit differently than that always on. And I think truthfully, a content dribble, I always call it the content dribble, but it's an easy trap to fall into as a marketer, right? Because when you feel like you're always on, you're like, oh no, it's okay. We have content on all the time. So everybody's seeing us, but you check the box on your side. But then if you take a step back and think about it from the customer point of view, like it doesn't feel that way at all. Like I only see the creators I follow, right? Which is why I heard personally a ton about Gwyneth because I have a ton of friends engaged with Gwyneth, but like, a girl on my team who's she and all of her friends love Becca and are super engaged in Becca and all of her content. And she got a million texts about the Becca post, right? So that gives you the super clarity on just the fact that the creators you follow are what you see. And so it's a mistake to believe the always on is right. And so if you instead choose to activate with a high volume of creators in a tight window, you are actually getting a surround sound effect and you're landing that, oh, wow, the RealReal is everywhere feeling. So I think that just gave us a lot more confidence in terms of the tight windows. And honestly, really honestly, for us internally, we have a relatively lean team. And so taking these creators and activating them in tight succession actually simplified things for us rather than adding complexity because it was concentrated, it was organized, and we could just like hit and keep moving and then sort of hit and keep moving rather than trying to just constantly be in the cycle.
Totally. I think and the exciting thing for us is that we're continuing. We're seeing, we're having these pulses really regularly. So in my ideal world, everything would be always on, but we're going depth over breadth. Like so many brands are sort of boiling the ocean and having one influencer over here, one influencer over there. And you noted that kind of surround sound effect and that I'm seeing the RealReal everywhere. We both kept hearing that in our campaign windows, which is so exciting.
And you can't do that all the time, right? Like you can't, first of all, from a financial perspective, but also from just people will tire of you very quickly. So you have to be relevant in those moments and think about like, what is the brief and how is it relevant and why are you there? Like, I think sometimes brands are just like, no, I just want people to hear my message. And you sort of have to think, well,
Why?
why? Like, what's relevant in this moment for them that they're going to actually hear your message? Because we all filter out way more than we filter in a given day just as humans. And so I think as a marketer, you have to be really thoughtful about that too.
Absolutely. And, again, this whole presentation, a lot of our messaging right now is about this predictive performance. But something that we also keep reinforcing is it's not just pure numbers for numbers' sake. Like, you can't, if you're yelling in the wrong room, there's no point in yelling. Like, we need to really always be making sure that we're showing up in the right moments, the right subcultures, the right pockets of the internet in ways that are actually going to move the needle for any brand and whatever they're trying to accomplish at that time. I can see that we've got a lot of questions coming through, so we'll jump to those in a moment. But I think before we throw it over to the crowd, I do also just want to round out this initial part of the conversation with the fact that you again have always been really big on testing. I've now had the gift of being able to work super closely with you and seeing how much of an advocate for innovation you are. And I was able to see you at Cannes speak about kind of cultivating curiosity and innovation on your teams. There's a lot of people here on the brand side who might be in organizations where there's a bit of a resistance to change or there's skepticism around testing or trying new things. So would love if you have a kind of tip to share with them on how to, be able to push something new and interesting forward.
Yeah. It can be hard, right? To sort of have this, I really think this could work kind of feeling, right? And how do you sell that in? And I think um there's a couple things. One is how do you lessen the impact, right? So there's like I joke, we did a big activation a few years ago on Canal Street.
Yeah.
And our team, like we joke, we literally rated the couch cushions to do that, right? It wasn't we didn't make this huge presentation, do this thing. So we thought about like how do we sort of scrape in with what we have? How do we sort of take the dollars we have and try to just make more of them? And
Mhm.
that really is how I tend to think of the philosophy is just how do I take what I have and get really scrappy and really resourceful? And that sort of forces innovation because, everywhere I've ever worked, you never have endless budgets, right? It just doesn't work that way. And so you have to sort of test and learn. And then that's where you can find the incrementality. And that then allows things to become more forecastable, predictable investments, not just like episodic experiment. Listen, like they're not going to all work. But
Mhm.
you can sort of pressure test through them and just say like, okay, well, if this happens, what happens with that? Or if this happens, what happens with that? Right. So thinking about how to then test and then scale thoughtfully is important. But the business case for testing is an important one to build, and every organization's a little bit different for how they feel about that. And every brand's a little bit different, right? Like some brands that they're not testing brands. I will say I'm very fortunate to work at the RealReal. We have a culture of test and learn and sort of being nimble to the findings. But I find in most organizations, if you lean in on what the opportunities are to really optimize, your boss is probably going to listen.
Totally. And to your point of like doing something, testing, learning, and getting that confidence to then swing bigger and to use the test as the case, we weren't working with Becca and Gwyneth on the first push.
Yeah.
We weren't coming out of the gate being like, let's go all in, chips to the middle and test in this really high investment way. But I think building that case through a smaller, more achievable test can build that confidence to swing a little bigger.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Scott.
Hi. That was really awesome, really insightful, so appreciative. We are overwhelmed with questions. So here's how we'll do this. This is okay. And to everyone, thank you for putting questions here into the Q&A. We've been trying, as you guys have been chatting, we've been trying to organize these and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. One other thing I would say before we jump into the questions is if you aren't already following Fohr on socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, please do, and we'll try and get to some of these questions in those social channels that are more for specific if we don't get to them in this chat. So just letting everyone know, if you're not already following us, please do. But we'll start, and Grace, I'll throw a couple of these over to you in a second. One of the thing, and we got a lot of these questions about Fohr specifically and how things work with predictive and how we're doing them. So if I can get to some of these, I will. But in any case, I just wanted to flash this screen up really quickly. Lauren Cavataro is our VP of Sales here at Fohr, and I wanted to make sure that if you have questions, more questions about how we do this, how we work with new customers, please feel free to take a screenshot of this, copy this email, and reach out to Lauren, and we'll be glad to follow up. So thank you for that. Now, back to some of these questions, and Grace, I'll throw it over to you, and obviously, Caroline, many of these are real specific, so I'll just kind of throw it over to you, Grace. I'll ask the question and then let you guys work through this to answer. So, first question, and I'm going to speak slowly on this so everyone can hear the question too, just to make sure we all get these. First question, was the RealReal campaign fully organic, or were any of the assets used across paid social channels? And if so, which?
Yeah, I can start if you like, Caroline, and feel free
Go
to
for it.
correct her. Yep. So the numbers that we shared for the specific performance all on those slides are purely organic, including those Becca and Gwyneth numbers. Those are organic performance numbers, which are pretty insane organic performance numbers. We did on our campaign have a handful of people, I think it was 3 or 4 potentially, and we locked they were not at the celeb macro level, they were a little more mid-tier, and we ran some paid advertising with their assets to make sure that we were kind of retargeting people during the period. But it was a very small allocation, and all of the results that were shared as part of this case study are just the organic numbers. Caroline, you look like you're nodding. I'm not misspeaking.
Perfect.
Great. Amazing.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So next question, and again, I would love to answer this one, but I do think, Caroline, you might have to answer this one for us because this question specifically asks, you mentioned that the RealReal has a very strong team internally, which is awesome. We agree. But why did you choose to work with Fohr on these campaigns most recently in Q3 and Q4?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is that as we think about expanding beyond the core fashion world and reaching into new customers who are adjacent to fashion or kind of like curious about the resale world, it requires different voices and different entry points and the sort of understanding of what exists at scale. And that's our team, that's not going to be their skill set, right? Like that's when it's super valuable to have a partner like Fohr, because you all have the relationships and the skill and the awareness. Like that is your world, right? Is like all of what, I would call the crew in the crowd, right? They're all in the world all the time, engaging with all sorts of different brands. And my team is an expert in our brands and our industry, but we can't be an expert in everybody else. And like that'd be silly. So that's where Fohr was a really key partner for us in thinking about how best to leverage those voices and enter people's mindsets and broaden awareness more generally.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, great. We genuinely appreciate that. Next question, and this is both, Grace and Caroline, you guys can both lean in on this question to answer. We'd love to hear best practices on how creators are briefed, and then specifically, what does that look like at the RealReal? So, Grace, I'll send that over to you first.
Absolutely. I'll actually go back to for anyone who's been working with Fohr for a while, you'll know that we have released a couple of different versions of industry rules for great influencer marketing. And one of them that I believe is key, and that I think so many brands miss on in influencer briefing, is not briefing for brand key messages, briefing for audience key takeaways. That sounds like semantics, but if a creator reads in the brief, these are the key messages, these are the brand's key messages. Again, I touched on it before, they are going to think a good job or a great job for me is getting as close to these messages as I possibly can. They also probably have had to do a million reshoots in their time. So they've got the brief up and they are trying to get it as close to verbatim as possible to avoid a scenario where they have to do double work. And then ultimately, what that leads to is often work that the brand will review and think, this actually feels really stiff or it feels really stale. I'm not sure where we went wrong. In a worst case scenario, they could even think the influencer really phoned it in, and the influencer may have actually been trying really, really hard to deliver what the brand wanted. Because again, it's saying brand key messages. So the influencer is thinking it's my job to give the brand what they want. What orienting around audience key takeaways does is push away that decade-long debate of who gets more control, brand or influencer. It is about the audience. It has to be about the audience. So if we all think about in the briefing, what do we need the audience to understand? That means that the brand can have the full confidence that they're going to achieve their mandate. They're going to get their product or brand isn't going to get lost. And the creator is going to read it and think like, okay, I need my audience to understand this. I'm empowered and equipped to do that in my own words, and I can do it in a way that is compelling and interesting. And ideally, you've got a predictive number benchmark, so they also know that there's like a performance aspect to this too. But that would be my number one for anyone who isn't working with us yet or can't. That would be my number one tip for briefing. Caroline.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think a couple of things. One, a brief is only part of the sort of execution, right? I think it's really common that everyone thinks that the brief is like all the things, and they try to solve for the strategy and the execution and the like parameters in a brief, like as a document. But it's not actually the sort of magic pill. It's like a critical component to get correct. There's a couple other things you need to do too, right? So I think having a sense of what is the kind of content that works really well for you, and then mapping that into creators that do that kind of content, right? So there could be certain fashion influencers even that are exceptional, but their content style doesn't really lend itself to the messages we need to land or what we need them to hear. Like, you sort of want to think about that. And so I think before the brief step is really thinking about who are you partnering with, and what Grace and I were talking about a moment ago of like that really looking at like who are the right people to deliver this is a key step. And then I very much agree with what you were saying, Grace, about framing the brief as like, here's who my audience is, and here's what I need them to take away from your content, right? Like the people within your world, like this sort of subset in my world look like this. They exist in your world too, and here's what I need those people to understand about this experience. And then giving the creator guardrails, not guidance.
Yeah.
I think helping a creator say like I think you can say like, hey, could you lean towards this, not that? Or like, please never ever say this. Like those kinds of things are like helpful. But that's very different than you should read this script. Like, think about the way I always think about it actually is like the most obvious execution is in podcast ads. So if you think about a podcast ad, right, when we all listen to podcasts, and sometimes podcast hosts just read a script that a brand gave them, and it just feels so inauthentic to that podcast host. And you're like, what? Like, why? And often it feels inauthentic for the brand. Like there's, the brand sounds weird, the host sounds weird, and like you as a recipient of that message are left with this imprint of like, what? And you're just kind of annoyed, right? And then you just skip more ads. But if you like sort of compare that to the times where a podcast host is given a good brief and is like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about how much I love this brand. This is a trusted voice, right? Think about how many hours we all spend listening to podcast hosts. And this is a trusted voice telling me that they love this brand. I'm far more likely to engage with it if it feels authentic for that podcast host than this weirdly scripted, stunted thing that just doesn't sound anything like them. And I think, if you think about it just in that isolated moment, think about that at scale in the creator world.
Absolutely. Yes, we often also say that it's our job as marketers to find ways of not interrupting the best parts of being online, but becoming a part of them. And in order to be able to do that, you do need to be conscious of like, okay, who are we casting and why? And what guardrails do they need? Let's build a fence and let them play within it and not try and kind of control and constrict every element.
Amen. That was a really good answer from both of you. Appreciate that.
Uh,
Okay, the final real question, and then with whatever time we have left, we'll run through a couple other more general questions. This question is, how is the RealReal thinking about Gen Z or younger as a target audience? And are creators a part of that strategy?
Yeah, Gen Z, we have every generation and geography on our platform all day, every day. And so Gen Z has actually a huge predilection for resale. They are far more likely than older cohorts to engage in resale as a primary behavior. They are far more likely to encourage it to others. They're super into vintage. Like it's sort of a natural fit with us and Gen Z. So obviously, we're huge fans of Gen Z, and I think the sort of world of social and how Gen Z engages with it is critical to who they are. Like you kind of can't separate it. So like, I guess the answer to the question, Scott, is like, yes, of course, social is a part of that, right? Like it's just as in a way as it is every generation we work with. It's just you have to figure out what's the right platform for that generation, who are the right people within that platform for how that generation engages. Because, I don't know about you all, but I'm sure that if you think about different generations in your own, friends and families and workplaces, everybody is using different social platforms differently. And so you really do have to think about that for each.
Caroline, I know Grace mentioned this earlier about, when I first came on board and asking if I knew what the RealReal was. And like I said, my wife has to be, I would say she's probably one of your top 20 customers, maybe
Love
a top 50, because I don't know how much people are spending, but I feel like we get boxes daily from there. And to the answer of that question about Gen Z, um, it's really exciting and appreciate that guidance. It puts a little fear into me having four Gen Zers at home too, thinking of them all shopping there too, in addition to my wife. We'll see what we can do there. That was really great. One other quick question, and thank you, Caroline. One other quick question, and I don't know how somebody got my text. Yes, these are Meta glasses, and yes, they're really awesome. Okay. Another question, and I'm happy to answer a couple of these myself really quickly as we, gear up towards the top of the hour here. A question was asked, with this new model of predictive, can I use this for my always on influencer marketing, or is it campaign specific? So with that, obviously, and I'll tie in another question to this too, just try and answer a couple together. Uh, we obviously are talking about this, and we're talking about a specific campaign that we work together with the RealReal. The way we work with other customers and prospects is, of course, our customers that are always on doing influencer marketing. We're working predictive into all of our existing customer relationships. And that goes for anything that is either campaign specific or that always on mentality. And it's just the different ways that we work with our brands and that we work with creators and bringing all those things to life together. So answer to that is yes, on both cases. We work with our customers on a campaign specific or an always on nature. the next question is, and I sort of answered this already, but I'm going to repeat it just for those of you that want to know very specifically, is the predictive performance tool going to be made available to all of our clients, or is there a minimum spend in order to see that data before committing to specific influencers? Again, it's a great question. We are making predictive available to all of our existing customers. As we still have Lauren's contact information here on the screen, what I can speak to very specifically of people wanting to try predictive. We do have a program where we are doing for new customers coming on board. We're running what we refer to as like a pilot program of predictive that has what I would consider to be a reasonable minimum spend in order to just see how this is going to work for your brand and to get more involved in it. So if you have any interest in trying out predictive in a pilot form, once again, please reach out to Lauren, and that would be great. And then the last question, I'm just trying to keep my eye on the clock here. And this was a lot of questions boiled down into one. We tried to narrow this down. Can you give more insight into how you approach guaranteeing results when it's necessary without spending more budget? So again, this was a combination of a lot of questions you all had, which we greatly appreciate. The way we do this, and I think this is a general answer, but we will get more specific, like I said, in our social posts on this. We as a company, being around for 13 years now, have some amazing relationships with hundreds of thousands of creators. And so what we're trying to do with this predictive technology that we're bringing to market is we are working with a lot of the existing creators that we have relationships with, and they are taking this as a real opportunity because they've been asked this before by brands, a real opportunity to show, accountability for a lot of the metrics that they've been able to garner through a lot of their posts on whatever social channel it may be. So for us, when we're approaching this, we obviously have these amazing relationships with creators. We value the creators so much. And in terms of our approach to guaranteeing results without necessarily doing more spend, that's a big part of the point of this, right? Like we want brands spending more dollars for more results and not necessarily spending more dollars just to try and reach an audience that they aren't sure of whether or not they're going to have the reach that they expect. So, with that being said, I know we're getting up here to the top of the hour. I want to thank Caroline so much for your time and all of your details that you shared with us and your partnership with us. Thank you, Grace, so much for being the hostess with the mostest here. And I want to thank all of you who joined us from around the globe. We really appreciate you and look forward to engaging with you more shortly. Thanks so
Thank
much, everyone.
Thank you, Caroline. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.